Well, good day, bonjour, buenos dias, bom dia. I wish I could greet you in your own language, but there is interpretation available. Il y a une interprétation en français, hay interprétation en espagnol, hay interprétation en portugués. There is a globe on your screen that you can click to choose your language. Also, there is automatic translation available in caption form in your own language. My name is Franco Famularo, and I serve as Global Coordinator of the International Summit Council for Peace, or ISCP, which is a project of the Universal Peace Federation, or UPF. I also serve as UPF President in Canada. If you have questions, please type them into the chat, and we will address them as we go along into the question and answer session. So let us begin. Welcome to all of you. I'm told by our team that has prepared the technology for this gathering that is taking place globally, and people are participating from over 80 countries today, almost as much as the World Cup, and I hope your team wins. The theme of today's webinar is the future of the rules-based order. Where do we go from here? There are 5 speakers today that come to us from Africa, Asia, Latin America and the Caribbean, Europe, and North America. The topic is of interest to many because the role and function of the rules-based global order, as it has stood for the last 80 years or so, is being challenged. What is the way forward in the context of international law, political realities, and the role of global institutions? And there is a growing awareness among people throughout the world of the urgent need for innovative vision and bold leadership if we are to resolve critical issues as the rule-based order in our time. So with this in mind, the International Summit Council for Peace, or ISCP, convenes global leaders whose shared experience, wisdom, and insight are essential to building a world grounded in interdependence, mutual prosperity, and universal values. And we gather global leaders who can address these issues based on their expertise. You can read more about the ISCP at our website, upf.org. Our first speaker comes to us from the Philippines. Her Excellency Gloria Macapagal Arroyo was the 14th president of the Philippines from 2001 to 2010. She will address this gathering via video, as she could unfortunately not arrange her schedule to be with us in person. Your Excellency Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, the floor is yours.
Leaders of the Universal Peace Federation, ladies and gentlemen, the premise of our discussion is that the global rules-based order created after World War II now faces profound challenges. We should distinguish the rules-based order from international law. International law rests on sovereign equality among nations, embodied in the UN Charter and in treaties open to all nations on equal footing. The rules-based order in practice has often meant the post-World War II system led principally by the U.S. and its allies. After World War II, the U.S. helped build the UN, the World Bank, the IMF, and an expanding network of institutions that supported decades of stability and growth. Ironically, it has not ratified the UN Convention on the Law of the Seas and is not a party to the International Criminal Court. The phrase rules-based order became prominent after the 2003 invasion of Iraq, which did not have UN Security Council approval. Today, several forces challenge this order. First, geopolitical shifts. After the Cold War, non-Western powers rose. Russia, China, India, Muslim oil exporters, and the broader global south, leading to groupings such as BRICS. This has produced growing rivalry between traditional Western powers and an emerging Eurasian-centered bloc. The West is consolidating alliances and rebuilding industrial, military, and technological capabilities. BRICS countries are building alternative financial arrangements, trade corridors, and diplomatic networks. Conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East have intensified these tensions. Second, economic and monetary disruptions. The Bretton Woods system effectively ended in 1971. Since then, petrodollars helped sustain the US dollar's dominant role. That arrangement is fraying. Sanctions on Russia showed that access to the global financial system can be cut off by political decision, prompting many countries to seek alternative payment schemes, reserve arrangements, and currency mechanisms. Cryptocurrency offers another option: digital, borderless, programmable, but lacks coherent international regulation. For developing nations, especially in Asia, these disruptions mean imported inflation, slower exports, rising debt pressures, and constrained fiscal space. Meanwhile, the World Bank and IMF remain inadequate and are accused of being subject to great power influence. Third, the rapid rise of AI. As Pope Leo XIV observes, AI makes information and complex analysis easier to access, but it also risks delegating important, sensitive decisions about employment, credit, public services, or reputation to automated systems that lack human compassion. He also warns that autonomous weapons and automated decision systems can make war more feasible. Where do we go from here? First, acknowledge and manage these changes rather than block them to maintain dominance. Second, any rules-based order that seeks broad acceptance needs anchor nations with a discipline to preserve foundational tenets that confer credibility, open access for all, and institutions able to address unavoidable strains. Third, BRICS, or any rising consortium, can gain legitimacy by following the same discipline: open access, problem-solving mechanisms, and predictable rules. Its recent proposal for the unit, backed partly by gold and partly by a basket of BRICS currencies, aims to make financial coercion more difficult. Fourth, on technology, we must disarm AI in the sense Pope Leo XIV means. Don't reject technology, but prevent it from dominating humanity, free it from monopolistic control, and open it to democratic discussion and oversight. Finally, on security, Professor Jeffrey Sachs has proposed regional spheres of security, analogous in some ways to the Monroe Doctrine, where powers agree to limit interference in each other's regions. Such approaches might work if they follow what I call the Asian way of peace, prioritizing economic development, regional cooperation, and pragmatic engagement rather than purely balance of power military blocs. ASEAN's emphasis on dialogue and integration, for example, has allowed major powers, the US, China, Japan, India, and Russia, to engage regularly despite disagreements. The rules-based order is not necessarily dying, but it is evolving under immense pressure. The task is to guide that evolution from a unipolar system to a more inclusive, credible, and adaptable world order, one that can integrate multipolarity and the reality of intelligent machines. Thank you.
You're muted.
Well, thank you, Your Excellency Gloria Arroyo. We are very impressed by the perception, the insights, and the practical guidance you've provided to this audience through your presentation this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening, wherever you may be. I think that we can gain a lot from this, and we will address some of these issues that she has raised in the next session when we go into the discussion. It's now my honor and pleasure to introduce to you His Excellency Dr. Goodluck Jonathan, who was president of Nigeria from 2010 to 2015. I believe he is in Nigeria this morning, and he comes to us live. Let us welcome warmly President Goodluck Jonathan. Welcome, Dr. Jonathan.
Dear moderator, Your Excellencies, greetings from Nigeria. I am honored to join these distinguished leaders, policy makers, scholars, and peace advocates gathered in Manila to reflect on an issue of great importance to our shared future, the future of the rules-based world order. Let me note that this meeting is taking place at a time of profound global change. The theme for this conference, the future of the rules-based world order. Where do we go from here? Is therefore quite topical. Across regions, geographical tensions are increasing. Conflicts are becoming more complex. Economic uncertainties persist, and confidence in international institutions is being tested. At the same time, humanity faces common challenges such as climate change, food insecurity, migration pressure, terrorism, cyber threats, and the rapid advancement of emerging technologies. These realities have prompted important debates about the future of the international system that has guided global cooperation for decades. I believe these developments offer us an opportunity to strengthen international cooperation and renew our collective commitment to peace, justice, and shared prosperity. The rules-based international order has contributed significantly to global stability, economic progress, and cooperation among nations. However, like all human institutions, it must evolve to reflect changing realities and rising expectations. For the system to retain the confidence of all people and nations, its principles must be applied with fairness, consistency, and transparency. This is why a long-standing calls for reforms in the global governance structure, particularly the United Nations Security Council, deserves thoughtful consideration. nearly 8 decades after the founding of the United Nations, many regions, including Africa, remain underrepresented in institutions that shape decisions affecting global peace and security. Africa is home to 54 sovereign states and more than 1.5 billion people, yet it lacks permanent representation on the Security Council. Addressing such imbalances is not about prestige, not at all. It's about strengthening legitimacy, enhancing effectiveness, and ensuring that global institutions reflect on contemporary realities. The calls for reform from Africa and other parts of the developing world should therefore not be viewed as efforts to dismantle the international order. No, never. They should be seen as contributions towards making it more inclusive, representative, and responsive. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I increasingly demands greater cooperation, stronger partnerships, and renewed commitment to multilateralism. The push for reform should therefore not be viewed as a contest between regions or civilizations, nor as an attempt to replace one form of dominance with another. Rather, it should be seen as an opportunity to build a more balanced international system founded on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and genuine partnership. The future of the rules-based world order will not be secured by power alone. It will be sustained by our collective commitment to fairness, dialogue, accountability, and human dignity. Our generation has a responsibility not only to preserve peace, but also to strengthen institutions that reflect the aspirations of realities of all peoples. Let me conclude by stressing that if we embrace that responsibility with wisdom and courage, future generations will remember this period as a turning point when nations choose cooperation over confrontation, inclusion over exclusion, and hope over fear. I thank you all, Your Excellencies.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. Good luck, Jonathan. We're very impressed by your insights, and especially coming from a continent of 54 countries and a country that has perhaps 1/4 of the population of Africa, which is surely the most the continent that is developing the most rapidly around the world in many ways. And we hope that representation will be provided at the Security Council and in all the major bodies that lend themselves toward promoting a rules-based order in the world. So we will be hearing more from Dr. Jonathan in the question and answer session. You will see the bios of each speaker in the chat, so please look at that. Our next speaker is His Excellency President Anthony Carmona. He was the 5th president of Trinidad and Tobago from 2013 to 2018, and also had an important role as a judge at the International Criminal Court. So let us welcome His Excellency Anthony Carmona. Welcome, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Beginning with the premise of our common humanity, excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is a profound privilege to address this august gathering, brought together under the visionary auspices of the Universal Peace Federation and the International Summit Council for Peace. We meet at a defining juncture in human history, a moment where the foundational architecture of global governance is not merely being tested, but actively fractured. Added to this, we meet at a time when there are not only rumors of war, but actual wars that are ongoing and which are broadcasted daily, on a daily basis, on our television. Even while we are glued to the said television viewing the enthralling FIFA World Cup. Wars, with little or no regard even for the basic tenets of international humanitarian law, continue to subsist. The law which is supposed to regulate the conduct of war. The question before us, where do we go from here, demands more than academic speculation or esoteric discourse. It requires a fierce, unyielding reaffirmation of our commitment to a rules-based world order. For a world without rules is not a world of freedom, it is a world of anarchy, where power eclipses justice, and the vulnerable and the voiceless are left to the whims of the powerful. The rule of law and the peril of unilateralism. My life's work both on the judicial bench of Trinidad and Tobago and within the hallowed halls of international courts and with their guiding jurisprudence I have been anchored by a singular, immutable conviction that the rule of law must reign supreme at both the national and international levels. The rule of law is the greatest equalizer. At the domestic level, it ensures that no individual is above the law and no citizen is beyond its protection. At the international level, it ensures that the global arena is governed by settled principles and modalities, treaties, mutual respect, rather than raw geopolitical muscle and outreach. We are currently witnessing a dangerous pivot away from this ideal, marked by a growing and corrosive unilateralism with its hydra-headed appendages. True progress and human security cannot be achieved through isolationist policies or the rogue exercise of power. Multilateralism is not merely a diplomatic preference or convenience. It is an existential necessity. The interconnected challenges confronting the international community, for example, from transnational crime to economic volatility, defy national borders. They demand collective multilateral solutions. And we must therefore reject that siren song of unilateralism and return to the painstaking, yes, very difficult, yes, yet indispensable work of consensus building. Sovereign equality, the bulwark of the international order. Central to this multilateral framework is the foundational principle of the sovereign equality of states as explicitly enshrined in the United Nations Charter. This principle must be one fiercely guarded as the primary bulwark of any legitimate rules-based world order. Whether a nation is a sprawling global superpower, or for example, a small island developing state in the Caribbean region, its sovereignty, its voice, its dignity, and its respect under international law are identical. True stability cannot exist if the sovereignty of smaller states is treated as secondary, inconsequential, or conditional. A rules-based order is only as strong as the defense of the weakest among us. Global justice and accountability, the role of the ICC. We cannot discuss a rules-based order without addressing the architecture of accountability. Laws are meaningless without mechanisms of enforcement and sanction. Having had the distinct honor of serving as a UN prosecutor of both the International Tribunals for the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda, the ICTY and the ICTR, and as a judge of the International Criminal Court, I have seen firsthand the vital role the international criminal justice system plays in deterring tyranny and providing a voice to the voiceless in the face of egregious impunity. The ICC remains an indispensable pillar of global justice and accountability, designed to prosecute individuals charged with the most serious crimes of concern to the international community: genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the crime of aggression. When domestic systems fail or are complicit, the international community through the ICC must draw a line in the sand. Ending impunity is a prerequisite for sustainable global peace. An existential omission: the case for a standalone international environmental court. Yet, as we look to the future, we must recognize a glaring and catastrophic gap in our current international legal and judicial system. The greatest existential threat to humanity, climate change and environmental degradation, lacks a dedicated standalone judicial forum with compulsory jurisdiction. For years, I have championed the establishment of a standalone international environmental court, the IEC. The planetary crisis we face, rising sea levels, ecocide, deforestation, destruction of our flora and fauna, and the disproportionate devastation visited upon small island development states cannot be adequately resolved through non-binding pacts, voluntary suasion, or fragmented environmental tribunals. We need a permanent specialized international court empowered to hold both states and transnational corporations legally accountable for environmental crimes and climate negligence. If we can try individuals for crimes against humanity, we must be prepared to try entities for crimes against Mother Earth. Ushering into a new era, United Nations reform and regional integration. If the international institutions of the post-World War II era are to lead us into a new era, they must be fit for purpose. This requires an urgent, comprehensive reform of the United Nations, particularly the UN Security Council, to reflect the geopolitical realities of today rather than what obtained in 1945. We must usher in a new era of respect for the international order where reformed and recalibrated international institutions take the lead in implementing rules fairly and transparently. However, global institutions cannot carry this weight alone. They must be robustly supported by regional integration movements. Organizations like the CARICOM, the African Union, and the European Union serve as vital transmission belts, translating global norms into regional realities and ensuring that localized insights inform global policy. Conclusion: the path forward. Ours is a world buffeted by remarkable ambivalence and ambiguity. Why can't we do the right thing? Because, ladies and gentlemen, it is the right thing to do. We have been articulating the right things, but doing the wrong things. Things do fall apart when one part is removed from the whole. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the road ahead requires courage. It requires us to look past immediate national self-interest and invest and have faith in our shared global future. Where do we go from here? We go forward by strengthening the rule of law. We go forward by codifying environmental justice into international law. We go forward by reforming and recalibrating our institutions to ensure and maintain equity, and by treating multilateralism not as a luxury, but as our defensive shield against chaos. Let us leave this seminar not just with renewed rhetoric, but with a renewed resolve to build a world where rules protect peace, law guarantees justice, and equality remains absolute. Thank you, and may each of us be perennial ambassadors of peace, promoting a global culture of sustainable peace. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency, Anthony Carmona, for touching on all these key points. And based on your experience with the International Criminal Court and as president of a country, although a small country in the Caribbean of maybe a little more than maybe close to 2 million people or so, you have a perspective that maybe those in the larger countries represented here, like the Philippines or Nigeria, which are very populous, may not have. And I appreciate your intervention this morning. We will now move to the next speaker, His Excellency Jose Manuel Barroso, who was Prime Minister of Portugal from 2002 to 2004. And he was also president of the European Commission for 10 years, from 2004 to 2014, where this issue of the rules-based order was a major issue in dealing with the population of Europe, which stands at maybe close to 500 million. He wanted to join us in person today, but he could not find a way to do so while he was traveling to Kazakhstan from Portugal. So he recorded this before he left, and we're grateful that he can intervene in this way. Your Excellency Barroso, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your kind invitation. I regret not being able to join you live, but I really appreciate the opportunity to send you my message on this very important topic that you propose me to discuss with you, the future of a rules-based order. First of all, what do we call a rules-based order? There are some discussions about it, but we can agree that it is basically the order that was created after the Second World War, based on principles of multilateral cooperation and broadly based on liberal values that were inspiring precisely the creation of the United Nations and other very important international institutions. So it's a set of principles and institutions that are the basis of today's global interaction and the relations between the countries, the organizations, and also the people of the world. Today, it's a commonplace to say it, and unfortunately I believe it is true, that this multilateral liberal order, the rules-based order, is in crisis. It's not yet clear if it is a rupture, that it's the real breakdown of this order, or if we are just transitioning, in a transition for something different. What for me is clear is that we don't know yet what's going to come afterwards. It seems to me clear that we no longer have the so-called world order of before, but we don't have a new world order. So we are in a moment of anxiety, uncertainty, and basically we could say that we are living in a world disorder, to be frank and to be honest, more than a world of order and rules and predictable outcomes. Some argue against the current global order that to some extent it is biased because it was created basically by the United States of America, by the so-called West, or what today many people call the global North. Indeed, it was created after the Second World War, and the United States had a huge influence and leadership in the making of this order, to a large extent supported by Europe and by the so-called Western powers, because at the core of it there were some principles that were in fact inspired by European tradition, be it the English liberal tradition, be it the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen of 1789. It was the French National Constituent Assembly during the early phase of the French Revolution, had approved this Declaration of the Rights of Men and Citizens. But afterwards, also there was the Bill of Rights ratified in the United States in 1791. But we should not forget that after that we had in 1948 approved by the United Nations, so in principle universal agreement on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was approved by the United Nations General Assembly. So in fact it was accepted not just as Western or European or American, but a universal Declaration of Human Rights. And of course we have the United Nations Charter of 1945 that was basically extending the principles, the liberal principles for the individual, for each person, to the cooperation or relationship between the governments of the world. The United Nations Charter that in fact confirmed the principles of sovereign equality of states, of prohibition of aggression, peaceful settlement of disputes, self-determination of peoples, and international cooperation. These are, in fact, the founding principles of the international order we are living in. So this order has become universal, and even the fact that some institutions were created in 1944, like the Bretton Woods Institution, the IMF and World Bank, the huge influence of the United States, or after in 1947, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, that was basically regulating the global trade. They were, in fact, to a large extent inspired by the Western powers. The reality is that after that we had the other countries that were not originally part of it, for instance China, People's Republic of China, or we had them joining also either the UN or the WTO. The WTO, I remember well, I was one of the signatories of the Marrakesh Agreement that was signed in 1994 and that entered into force the 1st of January 1995, the international organizations that in fact created a new order for trade. So basically, yes, these institutions were inspired or created by initiative of the Western powers, but they became universal, and in fact it was under this umbrella that we saw the remarkable growth of China and also the growing assertiveness of the so-called global South. So what may we expect now? Frankly, I don't believe that the two extreme scenarios are going to happen, either a kind of collapse of the international order, complete collapse, or reorder based on a new balance that is completely, let's say, accepted by the countries of the world. I believe there will be something in between, as we are seeing, for instance, in domains of trade, where there will be plurilateral agreements, not universally agreed agreements, in pure traditional multilateral terms, but more regional and region to region, as we are seeing, for instance, in some developments today in the field of trade. I believe some rebalancing is necessary. It's a matter of justice. When you think, for instance, the United Nations Security Council, some of the most important and the big countries in the world are simply not there, are not represented there as permanent members. So some effort should be made to accommodate the new powers and to have a more fairness in the representation at global level. So global North and global South, what we call sometimes global North and global South, should cooperate. That is certainly a matter of fairness, but I would say also of effectiveness, with an important caveat that both the North and the South should avoid some dangerous temptations. The global North should avoid arrogance. As I usually say, arrogance is always a form of stupidity. But also, the global South should avoid resentment. We understand the resentment, it's an emotional position, to some extent justified by the past, colonial past. But while this is an emotion, a respectable emotion, it cannot be the basis of a policy. We need to focus not on the governments, not on the past, but on the people, every person. Not an abstract concept of mankind, a statistical concept of mankind, but on every person, every woman, every child, every man. And if we do that, if we put the emphasis on the dignity of every human being, maybe you have some basis to push the governments of the world, namely the big powers, to accept that they should cooperate for global public goods that cannot be given just by one or two or three or four, that it does not make sense to divide the world, but to have a sincere cooperation for those values, namely the fundamental value today so much at risk of peace. Yes, we should do that. We should do that with a culture of restraint. It's a very important idea of restraining power, that power should not be absolute, be it at national level or international level, and trying to push the governments of this world to work for those public goods that are important for every person, every man, every woman, every child. This is why I believe we should do more. The international civil society and the role of each one of us is important to have a world based on important values like peace, like freedom, like justice, and the fundamental dignity of every human being. I thank you for your kind attention.
Leaders of the universe.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Emmanuel Barroso, for these insights and for bringing our attention to the issue of the views of the global north, the global south, east, and west, and how we have to get beyond our past and correct ourselves in order to make the important steps toward world peace and function as a rule-based order. Our final speaker comes to us from New York. He is currently the president. Sorry, there was a slight interruption there. He comes to us from New York and is currently the international president of the Universal Peace Federation. Please welcome Dr. Tajuddin Hamad. Welcome, Dr. Hamad.
Dr. Famularo, Your Excellencies, distinguished leaders, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining this important conversation. I'm truly honored to join these distinguished speakers who have enriched this gathering with their wisdom and experience. It is known that the post-war international order has rested on a simple conviction that power requires constraint, dispute require peaceful resolution, and nations require shared values. From this vision emerged the United Nations, the international laws, multilateral institutions, and many forms of international cooperation. Yet, today this order faces growing strain. The greatest danger is not simply that rules are violated. Rules have always been challenged and sometimes broken. The deeper concern is that trust in those rules and confidence in their fairness is weakening nowadays. This is why our conversation matters. Law gain authority when connected to justice. Institutions gain legitimacy when rooted in service. And leadership gains credibility when guided by conscience and public responsibility. From the perspective of the Universal Peace Federation, three challenges stand before us. First, power is too often separated from responsibility. States naturally seek security and stability. But when power loses its moral compass, rules become selective and trust begins to erode. Second, institutions weaken when trust declines. The world still needs the United Nations. It still needs diplomacy, international law, and negotiated solutions. But institutions cannot endure through procedures alone. They depend on good faith, restraint, and mutual respect. Third, humanity has become deeply interdependent. Yet, we have not fully learned how to live responsibly with that interdependence. Our founders, Dr. Hag Jahan and the late Dr. Sun Myung Moon, taught that humanity is one family under God. People express this understanding differently. Some speak in the language of faith, others speak of conscience, spirituality, or sheer human dignity. Yet the principle remains: humanity belongs to one wider human family. No nation can secure its future by treating others as permanently distant, inferior, or expendable. In this sense, the phrase "one family under God" is not merely an inspiring phrase. It is civilizational principles. UPF expressed this vision through three interconnected ideals: interdependence, mutual prosperity, and universal values. Interdependence reminds us that people cannot be built upon the security of some at the expenses of the others. Sovereignty remains essential, but sovereignty reaches maturity when it attributes to a wider peace. Mutual prosperity reminds us that world order cannot endure if it offers stability without fairness or predictability without hope. Nations and people must experience dignity, opportunity, and meaningful participation. Universal values remind us that law requires moral foundations. These values belong to no single nation, religion, or civilization. They include human dignity, responsibility, compassion, justice, family, and service. Without values, rules become technical. With values, rules become expressions of our shared human conscience. The world, therefore, needs more than institutional adjustments. It needs renewal from within, renewal of conscience, renewal of leadership, and renewal of public responsibility. The founder of UPF often emphasized that peace requires more than negotiation among competing interests. It requires leaders capable of rising above resentment, short-term advantage, and ideological rigidity. It requires what UPF describes as leadership with a parental heart. A true parent does not abandon one child to favor another. A parent does not confuse authority with domination. A parent accepts responsibility for the well-being of the whole family. Applied to public life, this means leadership that protects dignity, pursues reconciliation, and understand that victory without healing rarely creates lasting peace. This does not replace international law. It gives international law the human depth it requires. Rules without moral purpose become procedure. Power without rules become domination. Morality without institutions remains aspiration. Humanity needs law, power, and conscience working together. For this reason, UPF has long affirmed the importance of bringing ethical, religious, and spiritual wisdom into the international deliberation, including UPF founders' proposal for an interfaith council within the United Nations framework. This proposal meant to recognize that many conflicts involve not only military or economic or legal dimensions, but also identity, memory, fear, dignity, and the moral imaginations of peoples. So, where do we go from here? We need renewed commitment to the United Nations Charter, renewed respect for international law, renewed commitment to peaceful settlement of disputes, renewed institutions that are more trusted and more capable of serving humanity, renewal of the belief that humanity is bound together by more than competition. But above all, we need renewed leadership. Leadership grounded in conscience and guided by responsibility. The future of the rules-based world order will depend not only on which institutions are redesigned, but on what kind of leadership humanity chooses to cultivate. May our conversations help clarify not only what kind of world order we seek to preserve, but what kind of humanity that order is meant to serve. If the rules-based order is to have a future, it must become more than a system of procedures. It must become a framework for interdependence, mutual prosperity, and universal values. A world in which power serves responsibility, law serves justice, and nations learn once again to see one another as members of one caring human family. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hamash, for your profound message here and the important element of bringing the spiritual, the moral, and the internal qualities that need to be transformed in order for there to be peace and in order for a rules-based society to actually be effective. We have many questions, and if you have more, please enter them into the chat and we will try to get to them as quickly as we can. I'd like to, first of all, welcome our speakers to the stage here. We will gather, even though we're divided by oceans and distance, we are together as one family. Welcome, Your Excellency, Dr. Goodluck Jonathan from Nigeria. Welcome, Your Excellency, Anthony Carmona from Trinidad, our good friends, and Dr. Tajuddin Hamad, also known as Taj to some, my good friend. And I will start with a question for Your Excellency, Goodluck Jonathan. In your address earlier, you called for the international rules-based order to be made more inclusive. Could you kindly elaborate on how you feel this can be made to happen and the measures that you feel can make it happen? Because we have a lot of ideas, but we want to know how this can practically be done. And I'm sure with your great experience, you can cast some insight on that. Your Excellency?
Thank you, moderator, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's actually quite challenging to make it a little more practical, because there are a number of issues involved. But the key thing that everybody looked at is at the United Nations. And the United Nations, we have the Secretary General that controls the United Nations with a lot of officials. Every year, heads of states go there to make statements. But one major organ of the United Nations that is critical and relevant for world peace is the United Nations Security Council. And in that council is dominated by the P5 and makes it look as after the P5, every other person's opinion is relevant. In a world that only one country can stop any major thing that the rest of the world feels should go this way up, let's move to the right. That just one country alone can say no. And we don't move to the right because they have veto power. That brings the question that are we actually thinking about a stable society, or we are thinking about a society that some countries can revolt against the system and do whatever they think they can do. It could instigate some countries, just like somebody talks about emerging technologies. We don't know what will happen in the next 50, 100 years. Some countries that are hitherto unknown in terms of technology could develop technologies that become a threat to the rest of the world. And if this monopoly of power is not properly managed, the world may face greater threats as we progress. So we feel that the issue of the control of the Security Council should be reviewed to accommodate more interest. So every part of the world should belong and believe that they belong to the United Nations. And we believe that if the world must take a decision on any major issue, one country alone should not have that kind of veto power to overturn the rest of us. So that is one of the key things that people are debating. There are other issues involved, but if you manage the Security Council of the United Nations in a way that accommodates the interests of every part of the world, then we are moving forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Your Excellency, for your insights on this issue. And I hope that you will continue to engage in the way that you are right now and in many other jurisdictions to continue this effort, because we need people like yourself who have this broad mind to embrace the entire world. I'd like to now ask a question to His Excellency Anthony Carmona. In your presentation earlier, you very innovatingly called for an international court to be created to adjudicate on violations of the global environment. Could you elaborate, please, on how such a court could function and what would be the rules governing the environment that it would seek to enforce? I hope you heard me okay. Looks like you're muted. Dr. Carmona, you're muted.
Yes, yes, yes. I think, for example, what has spurred me on this particular issue jurisprudentially is what I would often refer to as the remarkable indifference and sometimes the apathy demonstrated by the greater powers of the world. I think, for example, that when you're living in a small island development states like Trinidad and Tobago, and in a region as small as the Caribbean, where our environment is very vulnerable, we sometimes feel that we are slighted when we express our concerns with regard to horrific hurricanes, flooding, involving deforestation, in terms of the agricultural sector, damaging what is often referred to as food security and integrity. And it appears as if there is a need, in my humble view, to go beyond expressing concerns, that there has to be a type of jurisdictional basis for dealing with the problem. It will be a court, in my view, that will not consist of judges alone in the law. But I envisage a court having not only judges, but scientists, analysts, who are able to look at the different environmental crises taking part in different parts of the world, who may be learned in spatial law, to determine where the pollution and where that environmental misfeasance arise. And I have seen personally, and I have in fact been part and parcel of two court systems where, for example, as much as in fact they may not be perfect, but I felt a sense of resolution in terms of ensuring that justice was properly served. I'm referring to the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda, and of course the International Criminal Court, where because of state complicity, because of in fact corporate involvement, corporate entities involved in bribing and corruption in relation to governance models in certain parts of the world, that justice was not being served. And in that regard, you know, the ICC, in fact, I need to remind people, is not a court of law. It is in fact it is a legal system of justice. Because when you look at the component of the ICC, you have different facets in terms of investigators, you have victim support units, you have, of course, the judges. What I propose is that I look, for example, at what took place recently, where an advisory opinion was given by the International Court of Justice. It was the subject of phenomenal applause throughout the world. I see that, for example, the General Assembly of the United Nations intends to give an affirmative mark to that particular judge, that advisory opinion. But after that, what happens? You know, at the end of the day, in fact, I need to impress upon you that an environmental court, International Environmental Court, would operate similarly along the lines of the ICC in terms of the law of complementarity. We are hoping that it would trigger local jurisdictions to put in place local environmental courts to deal with environmental misfeasance, whether international or local, that takes place within its territorial and sovereign dimensions. It is only when, for example, that there is complicity, that there is indifference, then in fact it would invariably trigger the International Environmental Court. Apart from that, when I look, for example, at all the international tribunals and the courts, I don't detect a sense of expertise, with the greatest respect to their intellects, a sense of expertise that would be required, particularly when dealing with environmental issues. So it is not that, for example, I wish to add to the expense of the United Nations. I am dealing with the very survival of humanity. We feel, for example, that things are going to happen and we will handle the flooding and we will handle this. But how many of you are out there? You buy a Mercedes-Benz, you buy a BMW, you have whatever car you buy. The real possibility exists that when in fact you are driving along the coastlines of your countries, you'll be driving in 12 inches of salt water, given what is taking place at the glacial meltdown that is taking place. You find the phenomenal heat waves that we're experiencing, the brutal fires all over the world. These things are not the result of happenstance. These are the result of major countries in the world not doing what is required of them in the context of ensuring that they become responsible citizens and protectors of Mother Earth. You know, the thing about it is this, is that I am not being esoteric here. The reality is, when you look at Louisiana, when you look at, for example, the Carolinas in America, they have lost hundreds of acres to soil erosion and rising sea levels. You look at Panama, for example. There are two countries where Panama, as we speak, are moving citizens from those islands to the mainland, because in 10 years' time, those islands would be underwater. We look at, for example, what is taking place in the Pacific, in Seychelles, where in fact persons are depending on tourism for their very livelihood. And that is at risk because of, in fact, the environmental issues that we continue to treat with a level of indifference. So we need a court that would create a system where we can have restorative justice. We could also have sanctions, and we can have a court that helps rehabilitate Mother Earth by its judgments of deterrence. Because at the end of the day, in fact, the ICC, for example, people say, why not put it under the ICC? The ICC's plate is full. They are dealing with crimes against humanity, genocide. They are dealing with war crimes. And now they have the law of aggression. They don't have the resources. They don't have the manpower. And with the greatest of respect, they do not, in my view, have the necessary expertise to deal with this pressing problem of environmental misfeasance. So
Thank you.
I know sometimes, in fact, I tend to be a little passionate about it, but when you live on an island, if you're not passionate, you know, you on an issue where your very survival is at risk, then something fundamentally is wrong with your psyche. So this essentially is my position with regard to the International Environmental Court. I mean, we can speak hours on it, you know, not naturally, but we don't have time. Time is of the essence.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency Anthony Carmona, for this perspective from an island. And, we know that John Donne said that no man is an island, but you do live on an island with a perspective that perhaps few countries have, other than the larger islands who have larger populations and more. But there's so much that is being asked here on this panel, and I have a flurry of questions, but I have time just for one more, and I'd like to address it to Dr. Taj Hamad. I'd like to integrate several questions here. How can the education systems be redesigned to cultivate values of peace? And Prime Minister Carney of Canada has been one of the leading voices proclaiming the breakdown of the rules-based order. How can this be dealt with, especially when some claim there's weaponization of economic integration and more? And what's the role of the Security Council? And what can we do about major obstacles to peace where people are so selfish and self-interested? And you touched on all of these topics while you were speaking, Dr. Hamad, but I'd like to give you a chance to give it your best shot and give the answer that everyone's hoping you can provide for all of these questions. Thank you, Dr. Hamad.
Thank you, Dr. Famiraru. And thank you, our dear distinguished speakers, for your wisdom and for sharing your time with us. I know you have plenty to do in the world, and we have gone beyond the time. I don't have the full answer for what you mentioned, but if I could say anything important at this time, is that we do need to look seriously on our education system, not only education system in one country or another, worldwide. Human beings are the most important capital, and so much could be cultivated if we really cultivate not only the mind of a human being, but cultivate the heart. If we find a way to direct our education towards heart more than towards the mind, I think we will have a better world to live in. We will develop maybe compassion to each other. We'll develop better understanding, rather than being engaged in the more technical education rather than heart education. Moreover, I think there is a big element of the society is missing now, which is women. Even now in our webinar, now we have only one woman speaking and the rest were men. We really need to engage women. Women have a wisdom which men don't have. Women have an important element to bring into the table, which is the heart. And that's what we are missing in our education, in our regular life, even in our leadership. For many years, the United Nations is being Secretary General of the United Nations is being a man. It is a shameful thing in some way. There's not even one for over 80 years. There's not even one Secretary General who is a woman. And there's, I think, about only 5 president of the UN General Assembly. We need to engage women in the leadership. We need to engage also young people, not just saying that they are the leader of the future, they are the leader now. We should have them not only as a listener or observer, but as a real participants. So I will end with saying that we definitely need a renewal in everywhere in our world now. But what we need to renew and to revive more than anything is the human heart, because that's where the problem is. If we educate the heart, the world will be much better. God bless you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hamad, for your comments, and they surely will be taken to heart. And I saw many good reactions from our audience here while you were speaking, especially from the 50% of the population that is represented here. And I'm glad that the first speaker was a woman this morning or this afternoon and evening. And I look forward to doing more of these where we can engage many other leaders from around the world. And I'd like to ask if you could bring all the speakers to the stage now, because we're going to have a moment to gather everybody. So, Your Excellency, Jonathan, good luck, Jonathan. Your Excellency, Anthony Carmona. Well, hopefully we can gather together here. Thank you for joining us this morning from Trinidad, from Nigeria, from New York,
Pleasure.
from Europe, from the Philippines. It was a wonderful opportunity. We know that we are on the same page. We want to see this world get better. We want to see that we live by the rule of law and that we promote the values that make for a better world. For our future, especially for our young people, I'm also hoping that there will be younger leaders participating as speakers in these events. So, on behalf of the Universal Peace Federation and the International Summit Council for Peace, I'd like to thank you for participating today. May you be blessed in your family, that there will be peace in each of your countries, and that we can find a way to overcome the obstacles that are preventing us from doing that at this time. So thank you all. God bless you.
Bless you.
May
All the
you
best.
all be filled with peace, and have a great day or great evening or great rest of the day wherever you are. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So,